Good morning, brothers and sisters. This is the last morning of our parish mission, and of course we keep the best wine to last, which is to speak about the Eucharist, and Father Padre spoke beautifully about the priesthood, which is so needed. But I'm going to tell you, before I speak on the Eucharist, something that happened that made me very aware of the suffering of priests because of, we say, which is true, the scandals of what priests did. We can't undermine the horrors that happened around the world, just like it's happening in homes and police and all kinds of vocations of people that have had scandals. But as you know, the only people that we expect, or we think the priests are, it can't happen. Unfortunately, it has. But you know, the devil is very clever, because he uses any way he can get. He's not interested in all of the things that happen in families or in other vocations. The one biggest vocation that is his threat, of course, is the priesthood. So with the result, just like in a family, when something terrible happens, many times families go through hell because of what people say, because of the embarrassment, because of things that make them shameful, and you're kind of thinking, well, it's not their fault. Like if I have somebody that did something in my family, it's not my fault. I can't say that, everything's bad about family life. But I had a very interesting encounter in Ireland, which really surprised me, which really made me very sad. One day I was with, this is some years ago, with Father Kevin. We were giving a parish mission in the Midlands in Ireland. And I was walking into the church from the presbytery in the morning for this Mass, 10 o'clock Mass. And as I was walking into the church was packed. And I go inside the front door, and as soon as I walk into the church, I heard, it wasn't a voice, but it was a voice without being like an audible voice, but I heard it. Go to the man. There was a man sitting in the front row, just in a jacket and sports shirt, and I was to go to him, and this is what I was to say to him. Now, this is before Mass, we have the Mass. Go over to that man and tell him I love him, and I'm with him. And I'm saying, this man's going to get an awful shock, because everybody's waiting for this nun to come. Anyway, I did. I thought, well, I better do it. So I went over and I whispered into his ear, Jesus wants you to know he really loves you and he's with you. He had his head down, he never looked up. And so after Mass, and the talk and everything, I was going back over to the presbytery to have a cup of tea. And as I walk out of the church, a car drove up to the curb, and the man rolled down the window and he called me over. And he said, "Sister, why did you say that to me at Mass?" And I said, "What?" He said, "When you walked over to me." And he was crying. And I said, "I have no idea. I just was told to tell you." Well, he said, "No, I want to tell you who I am. I'm an Irish priest. I've been working in America. I'm working in a diocese in America for 35, 40 years. He said, not that it means much. I have the title Monsignor. I had a very important role in my diocese. I love my priesthood." And he said, about 3 months ago, 2 young fellows, like high school, accused me of abusing them. He said, I couldn't defend myself, because they went to the bishop, they said, and they needed to get help. And he said, I was asked by my bishop to step down, to take time off and go home to Ireland. He said, my family, when I went home, were ashamed. They didn't want me in the house. He said, a woman, a kind woman, gave me the loan of a bungalow in another part of Ireland, which is where we were. He said, sister, for 2 months, I've been alone. Nobody called me. I'm desperate. He said, I have never touched anybody. I wouldn't even dream of it. He said, I had a very active parish, and these people weren't even from the parish. I suppose these young people, young men. So he said to me, you get to a point when you wonder, who cares? The bishop was playing it safe because we believe the lie. There's a law, a civil law, you're innocent till you're proven guilty. Sometimes in the church, you're guilty even before they find out. It immediately attacks, destroys you. So he said, I have cried, I have done everything. The biggest fear I have is that even my neighbours would get to know what when I was accused. But he said, I was in the grocery store the other day, the shop, and this woman, a neighbour, doesn't know who I am. She just thinks I'm an Irish priest taking a sabbatical. And no, she doesn't know he's a priest. She just knows that he's renting this house or whatever. She was standing at the checkout, and she turned to him and she said, do you know, are you Catholic? And he said, yes, of course. And he didn't pretend it. He said, well, do you know that Sister Briege and Father Kevin, they're very well known, and they're coming to give a parish mission in our parish. You should really come. And he's thinking, my God, I would be scared because maybe somebody will know me there. And, as I told you yesterday, fear is the enemy, is Satan's biggest weapon. And when that happens to a priest, of course, it puts fear in everybody. Because horrible things are happening now. Like people saying, when they see a Roman Catholic priest, pulling the children away, said, don't go near him. Maybe a good priest walking down the street in Dublin, that happened to. 2 American priests in Dublin, that happened to. Anyway, so he told me, he said, sister, I got so desperate that I said, I'm going to commit suicide. I don't know what to do. He brought him so low. And then he said, I even lost my faith in Jesus. I'd been in the church for all these years. And he said, I prayed, and he said, I just said, Jesus, I don't know if you love me or care for me. I'm just so desolate. And what the woman said to him about going, he decided, I'll go, but I'll stay at the very back of the church. I'll leave right after Mass. Anyway, he said, on my way to Mass, I said, Jesus, if it's possible, I'm so deaf, show me that you love me. He said, when you walked over to me, and I've never seen you in my life, I know of you, but I've never talked, and you said, Jesus wants you to know he loves you, and he's with you. He said, I got such a shock and an awareness that he was with me. So I said to him, Father, come over to lunch with Father Kevin and the pastor, the parish priest. And, he said he was delighted. First human people that he had been able to talk to. And the 2 priests encouraged him and said to him, come back to the mission. We're having a day tomorrow for priests. They don't know you, come. Anyway, he came every day for the 4 days. And then he sent me a message that the court case was coming up in the US. And to pray for him. In the court, both these young boys, when they were questioned and cross-questioned, said they made it up to get money, to pay for whatever they wanted. And he wrote back and said to me, Sister Briege, I hope people realize, those young people, what they have done. The same happened with Cardinal Pell. I was a great friend. I knew Cardinal Pell, who went to prison. And one of those boys on his deathbed said it never happened. Another of them denied it. But the media, and he had one terrible experience. And I tell you this as lay people to know how important what Father Pablo said, to pray for priests. Cardinal Pell told me that one morning at Mass in his cathedral, and this is why these, whatever you call them, LGBT, we are not against people, but if people are forcing their way of life and morals, and they want us to agree, this is what's happening. The anger against priests or you as families who say, I accept the sinner. We accept all people as sinners, and we love them and help them. But they cannot force us to rationalize and to compromise the truth that Jesus taught, that Paul taught. So he said one day in the church, the door opened just before Holy Communion, and up comes this crowd of people, very, very angry, dressed in horrible outfits, and shouting to him, will you give us that? The host. And Cardinal Pell said, if you come in here like any other good Catholic, and you walked up here with yes, but you want the sacred host, this is Jesus, you want to make a statement. No, I won't. And he said, they looked at him and said, we will get back at you. And look what happened to him. There probably were other reasons as well, but that man he came to see Father Pablo and myself after his prison sentence. He spent 6 months being humiliated in a prison, a cardinal. And people say, oh, he must have been guilty. That's why, we will be judged harshly, because what they did to Jesus, they're doing now. Sure, there were many false prophets came, many people who probably did things. And when Jesus, the Son of God, they categorized him as in the same category as some of the horrible people they compared him to. He's a Satan, he's a devil, he's false, he's what? That, what you do and what I do to, Jesus told us, to each other, we do to him. But one of the biggest, I think, sins for us as Catholics is that we don't defend. We have to punish those. There's a law as well, and that's important. But what we are doing in many Catholic countries, and especially my beloved Ireland, and if they're listening to me, what we're doing is we're joining Satan and throwing the stones and denying that Jesus gave us a priesthood that was not perfect. Sure, they have sexual struggles, sure they have what we all have, but we're all called to chastity, we're all called to holiness, and we're certainly, the Catholic Church has to be vigilant on who it accepts for the priesthood. That's very important, just as in my congregation when we're being accepted. And that's why I'd say to you as Catholics, don't ever participate in the gossip. Pray for those men. I've seen those who have done wrong, and I tell them, you have sinned, you have done terrible things, but you can be forgiven and make reparation. Pray for those people you have abused. But that's for everybody as well. That man, and Cardinal Pell gave a talk in my diocese, my bishop in Florida. When he came to visit me, I told the bishop, and the bishop said I'd love him to talk to the priest. And his topic was humble man, no bitterness, not. He talked on the importance of redemptive suffering. He talked about not being able to get Mass. He talked about one of the biggest criminals in the prison he was in, said that man is innocent. There's nothing, that's not right. And yet, it happens. So I really encourage you, I've been ministering to priests for 50 years now, and there's all kinds of things happen, but there are many, many good priests right now who are scared because somebody, one of you or me, can say one thing about them and they're out and they're destroyed. whether it's true or false, because many priests who are afraid. And I often pray for those priests and orders who are working with children, because they're, when you think of Salesians and all the people in schools, a principal in a school in Ireland, a layman, a teacher. My cousins are teachers in the same area. A lovely family man, a Eucharistic minister, a daily communicant, was accused by 2 youth in the school who were paid by 2 older students to accuse this man, the principal. And before the trial, which proved diminished, he died. And he probably died it was a horrible thing. But that's the dangers of anybody working. We have to pray for protection, but don't let fear paralyze you. The same with a social worker that I talked to, lovely man, a big family. And he was told by the people, if a little Down syndrome child or something, to come running and hug it. Children love priests, little innocent, do that. Can you imagine what that does to a little child who comes to run to hug somebody, and you do this? So it's unfortunate that this is the state that right now. And so I ask you, pray. And maybe this is why vocations are not coming, because Satan is putting fear into young men. So please pray. And, pray every day in your rosary for priests. Pray for the protection. And pray for those who have done terrible things to bring shame on the church. Because they too need redemption. They too need, half the times I think, is it prison they need, or is it medical health, mental treatment for all these people that do these things, whether clergy or non-clergy. So, now, I want to tell you talk a little bit about the Eucharist. Because I think one of the big gifts we have is the best gift, is to think that when you walk inside that church and Mass begins, you are standing in the presence of the whole passion, death, resurrection of Jesus. When God sent his Son, which is not imaginary, God sent Jesus. Jesus came into the world as a baby, we heard yesterday. Why did he come to earth? Why did he come down on this planet? For the one purpose was to redeem us, because Satan was in controlling and going to destroy us. We had no chance of getting to heaven on our own. I'm putting this in simple words. We were held captive. And God the Father, who loves unconditionally, didn't do this for the angels. When the angels fell with pride, he sent them to become devils and went to hell. But when the people that God created, and created them, as Father said last night, to be perfect, to be happy, to live forever, all of a sudden, sin through our first parents came. And it was a terrible, terrible, terrible thing, because now death is the consequence of sin, and we would lose salvation. But God the Father didn't want that. So he sent his Son, because there's a lovely prayer here about the Son, and it goes like this: thank you, Jesus, for your sacrificial love, for standing in for me at Calvary, taking my place, erasing my sins, redeeming my soul, for paying the ransom that I could never provide, cancel the debt I could never repay, and reclaim my soul for eternity at the price of death on a cross. Thank you with all my heart for your saving love. That was the purpose of Jesus coming. But it's beautiful to think that he didn't come and just appear. He came and took on flesh and became the little child that was helpless. As a baby, he couldn't do anything. except everything he received from his parents. And all this time, it was a school of learning. He showed. The first thing I really believe that happened when Jesus came into the world is family life. They picked a father and they picked a mother. Mary was chosen from all time, but so was Joseph, even though he wasn't immaculately conceived and he was not without sin. The only one is Mary. And yet, he was in a family. So the first thing they taught us, family life is a natural and beautiful and sacred way to provide for children. And as he grew, you can see how Mary is teaching him. Joseph has him, if we believe that, Joseph must have loved him. And Mary, think of what a husband, think of what a father, because to all appearance he was his father. And yet in the secret of their hearts they had to know, what a special boy. Mary went through the suffering and Joseph of losing him. Why? And Jesus went home with them. But he said to them, I had to be in my Father's house. To us that would be an insult, but it wasn't to Mary. It wasn't to Joseph, because they knew there was something special. But at the same time, it was recorded to let us see the pain they must have suffered. And then when he started his public ministry, why did he choose 12 men? And then many followed. Because he was preparing them for the greatest thing that was going to happen, which was the victory. But he wanted those 12 men to be equipped with the normal things to learn a trade, to equip as followers of Jesus, how to act, what to do, how to relate to people, because he taught them all this, not what to do and what to do. And he taught them to prepare them for what he was about to do. And what was he about to do? On Holy Thursday night, at the Passover, he had prepared, the Father had a great plan. And what was the plan? The plan was to take these 12 men. He didn't take his mother. He took 12. One of them, was bad. When you think of what Judas did, but God had picked him. Because it's a free will, you make choices. These priests and people who make choices, it's not God that did that, it's they make a choice, because we are blessed with free wills. Free will is, when you have free will, it's a big responsibility. But God chose them, knowing that they were sinners, sick, all the things that was wrong with them. And on Holy Thursday night, he gathered them around a table, and they had what we would call today the Mass. Two things. He ordained them. He gave them power. And he also gave them authority. And he told them that before this happened, he said, I'm going to give myself to you. Those who eat my flesh and drink my blood will have life. The apostles didn't understand, I'm sure, and the people certainly didn't understand listening to Jesus, because they thought, this is cannibalism. How can he give us his flesh to eat and his blood to drink? And you know the thing about it? He didn't say to them, many of them left, and the apostles stood still. But did they understand? It's a mystery for all of us. How can we have the body and blood of Jesus? How can this host be a person with the same, everything the same as a human being and yet divine? It's a mystery. But the apostles stood their ground. The leaders who loved Jesus and loved the miracles and loved everything, they got up and ran away. They left. Why? Because they couldn't, they said it's too hard of a saying. But you know something? Jesus didn't run after them and say, oh, don't leave. Or don't leave the church. Oh, no, we need you. Don't leave. It's not really what I mean. He did mean it. And this is what I can't understand, brothers and sisters. When you read John chapter 6, it's as plain and clear about the Eucharist in that chapter. And it's plain that Jesus had no intention of compromising and saying it's not true. He told them, unless you eat my flesh and drink my blood, you will not have life. And you will have life in abundance, he tells us. And he said, you know, I'm the bread of life. Now, on that Holy Thursday night, he gave these men the power to offer Mass, to the Last Supper, as they call it, whatever they were calling. But what is it? In the miracle of God's power, what the Mass is, it's the victory. And what Jesus was doing, he was going to go out and be crucified, being denied, being scourged, being crucified. And he was going to rise in 3 days. He was going to win the victory because he was going to overcome death. But in order for this to be prepared for us, he gave the apostles a power, and to every Catholic ordained priest in the Catholic Church, in the Roman Catholic Church, and of course in the Orthodox, have the valid sacrament as well. But what was he doing? He was making sure that you sitting in these pews here in Scotland today would have an opportunity to be at the victory, to be at the event. Because Padre Pio said, when a Catholic walks into the church and to come to Mass, the moment the priest opens the Mass, blesses, time ceases. We are out of our time. We talk about today, tomorrow, yesterday. The moment the Eucharist starts, time ceases, and we are present at the victory that was won for us. And this is why the Catholic Church puts an obligation on Catholics. This didn't change with the Vatican Council. This is still valid. It is still a mortal sin if you deliberately decide not to go to Mass. Why? Because the Church as a mother knows, which is the body of Christ, which is the bride of Christ, that we need to claim the victory. We need the protection of the victory won for us on Calvary. And one way to receive it and to receive the blood, the body and blood that Jesus gave to us, is to protect us from the kingdom of Satan. Because there's a kingdom of Satan. Like 2 weeks ago or a month ago in Kansas City, thank God the Catholics and many of the Protestants were out against. The Satanists had a huge Satan conference. And the big fear was, were they able to get the sacred host? They were eventually, the people won that they didn't go into they were going to carry out a weekend conference to Satan in the capital. And they finally pressured the governor into saying this is wrong. So they were outside the government, but they had all their stuff there and got coverage. That's the kingdom that Jesus fought against. He won. And that's why the Catholic Church tells Catholics, it's not a prayer meeting, it doesn't matter what beautiful music and how charismatic, in the sense people say, oh, I'm going to a charismatic Mass. A Mass in a dungeon with a priest to his power and bread and wine. It is the Eucharist, it's the same passion, death, and resurrection. The beautiful liturgies can be beautiful, but if you don't have a priest, it's just a lovely celebration. Once you have an ordained priest who can make this present, that's the best. That's it. But Satan knows that. So since that crucifixion on Mount Calvary, it is that event that comes present. It's not that Jesus dies and dies and dies. Every Catholic should understand that when you come to Mass on a Sunday, you're not coming to be entertained. You're not coming because you like the music. You're coming because this sacrament will liberate you and protect you. And can you imagine when you read the Passion of Christ? Now we'll be reading it during Lent and at Holy Week. You think of what I'm telling you. When you're reading the Passion, you ask yourself, in all the characters of the Passion who were around Calvary, who saw Jesus being beaten, ask yourself, where would you be in the crowd? Would you be shouting, "Save yourself," if you're the Christ? Would you be standing saying, "Oh, it doesn't really interest me. I'm not really interested in that"? People walked by Jesus and just shook their heads as he carried that cross to Calvary. And can you imagine his mother Mary watching this and knowing, she had to know, that why is he doing it? He was doing it to take what this prayer says. He was paying your debt. He was going to give you an opportunity to get to heaven. He was taking what you could never make reparation for. And not only was he going to do that, but he was going to give you himself. So that, it was Jesus told me one day at adoration, only last year, when a woman asked me to pray for her because she was going to the hospital for blood transfusions. And she kept saying to me, "Sister, I can't figure out," I met her at morning mass at my parish. She said, "Sister Briege, I go to I get blood every so often at the clinic. But," she said, "the doctor keeps telling me, and the blood is the same type, but it's not doing what they expect. So," she said, "I have to go in now for a whole scan because my body is not reacting to the blood as it should." So she said, "Pray for me when you go home." So I always, have a couple of hours of adoration at the convent. The other sister worked. So I was sitting in front of Jesus and I was saying, "This poor girl, I know her." I was praying that the blood transfusion would take. And do you know what I heard? Loud and clear. "Tell her and tell all my people that I give them a blood transfusion every day of my own body and blood." And then I got this teaching that if Catholics, there's a lot of Catholics come to Sunday Mass, and there's a lot of Catholics who are in depression, discouragement, who live very tough lives. And it was as if Jesus said, "What is wrong? It's not my body and blood because it's his. And if we are receiving it every Sunday, and a lot of us every day, why are we not different? Why are we so prone to all the sins that we do?" And I felt the Lord saying to me, "Look at yourself first, because I'm going to communion every day since I was 13. I live with Jesus in a convent. And I look at myself and say, well, why am I not better?" And it struck me, it taught me, because I started saying, when I go to Mass, I'm getting the blood transfusion for today. Jesus, help me for today. And it's amazing. So when you come to Mass, if you're sick, if you have problems, if you have whatever, not only are you there to receive that great victory that he won, but you're there to receive part of the victim, who is Jesus. So that's the first thing I want to tell you about the Eucharist. The Eucharist is the passion, death, and resurrection of Jesus. Your presence there is not to make Jesus feel good or to please the church because it's an obligation or because you're afraid of your life of sin. Those things help. Sometimes you have to, there's laws made, and the laws are to save you. If you go through a red light, not that you broke the law. If you think, that the church's teachings and laws and commandments are to punish you, you're failing to see that just as in the civil world, the civilian secular world, when laws have to be made or there'll be terrible things going on, it's the same in the church. The true church, this is the Catholic Church. We have to recognize that the church gives us teachings for our protection, to save us. It's not to punish us. And the same with marriage, the same with all these other moral issues. But when you go to Mass, so please remember, brothers and sisters, and I know an awful lot of people, even listening, who can't go to Mass. I pray that priests and people will come and they get an opportunity to receive the body and blood of Christ. But I say to all those Catholics who are listening, since COVID, you have no idea how many people say to me, "Oh, Sister Briege, I just love watching EWTN, and I get Mass all over the world now on television. And I get more out of it than go to the church because the priest is boring or something like this. Do you know what I tell them? I say, you know something? If your mother lives half a mile away from you, and you have a lovely photograph, the most beautiful photograph of your mother, and you have it on the mantelpiece, and you call your mother up and say to your mother, Mom, I'm not coming to see you anymore because I have the most beautiful photograph of you and I'm going to look at it. How would your mother feel? Or you said it to your children, I'm not going to, I love that family photo, so I'm just going to watch that, look at that. Well, Jesus is alive. He's a person. He's real. And he's saying to himself, they're going to stay at home. He's not real on the television. It's television. It's beautiful when you need it and you have it and you pray. But if you have good health, and if you can go to I said them in America, you can go to the beach or you can go to see rugby and soccer and all these things, and you don't go to Mass because you look at it in the evening on television. It's a sin. You can't do, what would Jesus say? He'd let you leave because it's your free will. But that's why when you go to Mass, you're coming for the victory. You're coming to show Satan, Jesus won our victory. We won the victory with Jesus. For the second thing that the Eucharist brings us is communion. We have communion with the victim, Jesus. Holy Communion is this transfusion. Holy Communion is the most powerful gift. I mean, we're very blessed in our centuries that we can receive Holy Communion every day. When people long ago, once in a lifetime, this is an extraordinary gift. And this is where we see most miracles. I'll be telling you tonight. Many, many miracles. I remember, I told you yesterday that I went to see, I started praying to Our Lady because I was getting real worried because of all the people following me and not going to Mass and making me an idol and whatnot. And I went to Lourdes, and that was where I begged Our Lady to teach me how, as a Catholic nun, to stay in the heart of the church. You know, I'm always very suspicious, which is terrible maybe, when people come, they haven't been sent as Catholics, because no priest is on his own. He has a bishop, I have a superior, I'm a Catholic, so if I'm not a freelancer, I can go where I like. I get permission. I get Father Pablo's bishop in Spain and my bishop in Florida blessed us and give us a blessing to being sent out. And that's why, you know, in many other churches you have these, and it's a danger, even in the Catholic Church, of becoming a celebrity. You know, you can be a YouTube celebrity, and Satan can use it very good, and there's a lot of great things happening. But we always have to be careful that we realize there's no celebrities in the Catholic Church. What we're doing is what Jesus asked us to do. There's no big names. That anybody who preaches the gospel of Jesus Christ in the Catholic Church, it's a mission. It's not connected to celebrity world. People say to me all the time, you know, and I laugh, Sister Briege, are you famous? And I remember going to an old folks' home in Ireland, these old, all elderly men there, and the nun told them, there's a famous nun coming, and behave yourselves now. And this old man looks at me, he's not too far from where I grew up. This old man looks at, he couldn't contain himself anymore, because I didn't look any different than any, I can be like a nun to talk to him, and he says to me, what's so famous about you? And I said, oh no, I'm not famous, but I do work for a famous person. Is he Irish? And I said, I'm not too sure. And the fellow beside him said, oh, shut up. She works for Jesus Christ. Be quiet. But you know, isn't it true? I mean, that's what I always say to them. Oh no, I'm not famous. I work for I do no different than my dear sisters who are doing marvelous work in my congregation of visiting the sick and all the things to do. There's no difference. It's not celebrity, it's for Jesus. Anyway, so remember, communion with Jesus, that's the gift that will heal you. And I was going to share with you, when I went to Lourdes, I got this word from Our Lady. Pray, and I knew she was going to give me a teaching. A month later, I go to the garbage dump in Mexico with a great Jesuit priest who asked me to come and pray with the poor. I went there. It was packed with poor people. And this one Jesuit, one priest, he got a word. He was teaching in a high school across the border. It was on the borders of Mexico and America. And he left with a word given him, go out to those people and feed them. Not just physical food, which they needed desperately, but spiritual. He started like some years before I met him. And he would, you see, there's a big danger that we can get so preoccupied with, we're going to help the poor. Well, we have to. But if the missionaries had gone to Africa and to all these countries and just focused on the materially poor, we'd never have the faith. If Patrick came to Ireland, why did he come? If he had just, preoccupied himself with feeding the Irish and, helping them that way. That's why Father Pablo is on a mission in Costa Rica, and it's phenomenal what he's doing, because he's giving them Jesus, and the beggars are going into adoration, and there have been Sisters of Charity doing the same. That, you have to recognize, and this is what she taught me, that the most powerful mission is when the priest, who's not a social worker or a nun or working for the church, is not when they give Jesus, and honest God, he multiplies food. Unbelievable things happen. Well, I went at this dump, and I was so taken by the people, and just at the Mass was starting, a woman walks down the aisle with a bag, I thought it was a gift for the priest, puts it out in front of we had a little table like this, a bit bigger, for the Mass that the priest brought with him. He puts it in the middle, and this woman walks right up the middle of all these people who are standing around in the dump, poor, waiting for Mass. She walked straight up to where the table, and she said, Father, I found him smouldering. And I looked at what she was going to open. She opened, it was a little boy, completely burnt. Skin pulled off with her rough poncho. You know what, I'd love a drink of water. The devil. I'm going to finish. No, not brandy today anyway. But anyway, Father said, we say a prayer, no medicine. He was like scalded because the skin was pulled off him. I'm looking at him and I'm thinking, oh, good man. Thank you so much. Thank you, Father. Okay. Pray for me, all you watching me. Anyway, the priest said to me, let's say a prayer. And then Father said, put him under the table. Now, the table wasn't very big, but he pushed him under the table. He was screaming. You could hear him a mile away. We start Mass. And as the Mass started, I was standing to the side, and I opened my eyes. I had my head down like this. Opened my eyes. At the consecration, there was dead silence. I look up. They're all prostrate. The little boy becomes quiet. I look at the host, big host, and it's Jesus looking at me like that. And I remember thinking, these people, at the same time as I was looking at the host, they lifted their heads, and if you saw their faces, and they shouted, Viva Christa Rey, long live Christ our King. The same happened with the precious blood. I go round after Mass. I was unbelievable, the attendance and the joy of these poor people. I go round to see the little boy, and he wasn't there. So I said, where is he? And the old woman that brought him in said, there, sister, in Spanish, with I had an interpreter. Do you know what I said to her? Can you imagine? What happened to him? Excuse me. She said, Sister, Jesus came. At the consecration of the Mass, when the bread and wine was changed, the child was totally changed. I spent about 4 hours on the mountainside that day. I didn't pray with anybody. I saw a little Down syndrome baby being carried in at the beginning by a young girl. At the end of Mass, she came up to me smiling. She said, Sister, look at my baby. Completely healed. I went across the border back to America that day, and I was staying at the Jesuit residence. And being Irish, Mass in my, look, this goes back 50, 60 years ago. Mass, I went to Mass as a child all the time. I went to Mass as a nun. But I never, ever thought about this healing or about what happens at Mass. I just went to Mass because I loved Jesus and I was healed and everything. But in the middle of the night, I couldn't sleep because I thought, why did Jesus bring me to the poorest place? I got up, I knelt at the side of the bed, and I said, Jesus, what are you trying to teach me? And I heard the Lord saying, you asked my mother, and she's showing you now what's important. From now on, I want you to go through the word, speak on my power in the Eucharist, and the healing service we have. Let me heal my people. Show them me. And since that time, we have gone all over the world, and I've seen miracles through the Eucharist. Unbelievable. People healed of cancer, people healed of blindness, and not all people healed. People getting the grace to accept suffering, people getting totally converted. I told you about I told somebody about the last year in St. Patrick's Cathedral. We had Mass, we had adoration. It was 2 years ago it happened. And I went up and I sat at adoration under the big host. I was sitting in the chapel. And the following year, I was back there. And this little Oriental man came around where I was signing books and he said, I have to tell you what happened last year here. He said, I went to every church. He said, I didn't have any religion. I went to the Baptists, the Pentecostals, them all. And I wondered why they were all going to these churches. I never found anything. But I was passing by St. Patrick's last year. And I thought, there's a lot of people around here. He said, so I went in. First time in a Catholic church. And I thought, it's like a circus. The priests all dressed up. He didn't know what was happening. So he's watching Father Pablo, and Father Pablo is introducing me to tell him what I was going to be doing. That this was Jesus, and that I would be praying, and that Jesus reminded them of the story of Jesus touching the woman when she touched the hem of his garment. And he said, that's because they believed. So then he talks about me having the gift of healing. Well, this wee Oriental, I don't know what country somebody wasn't from the West, he decides he doesn't know what's happening, everything's over. And then they put this big white thing on the altar, he said, and they all sat in silence. And I thought, well, I have to go. Because he was on his way to a meeting. But he said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go up and touch that nun. Because if that's true what that priest is saying, maybe she could help me, whatever he had wrong with him as well. So up the aisle he comes, everybody's sitting in silence, and he gives my veil a pluck. And then he plucks me here. And I turned around and I looked at him and I said, what are you doing? And he looked at me. I said, look, that's touching. I said, that's Jesus. That big host is Jesus. You sit down there and talk to Jesus. He put the wits out of the poor fella. So he said he got such a fright that he jumped in the seat behind me and he sat still. He didn't move. And he said, I just kept looking at the host, looking at you. And he said, in an hour, all my questions were answered. I went home. He says, I'm telling you this now a year later. He said, I went home, I went to instructions, I joined the Catholic Church, and now I know why. He said, because now I know that the host was Jesus and he was talking to me without me even realizing it. And that's how powerful the sacred host is. He didn't say a word to Jesus. He was just glaring at him, afraid that none would turn around again maybe. And Jesus completely converted him, completely transformed him. He's in love with us and he wants you to come. So that's the second thing, communion with Jesus. And the last thing, in the Catholic Church, we have a sanctuary lamp. That sanctuary lamp is telling us there's a person lives here. And this is the place, especially with adoration. I'm so happy you have it. Whoever and whenever you can come, even to spend a half an hour. There was a bishop that I knew who started adoration, and many of the priests said, it'll never work, the people won't come. So the bishop was really inspired. On a Sunday, he said to the people, every Sunday for a couple of weeks, he said, look it, you're all from families. Now there sure must be somebody in your family, one. I'm going to give you an idea and I'm going to ask you to think about it. I want the Murphy family to take care of Jesus for an hour. You can sign up where your family, to come and spend an hour with Jesus, adoring him, praying, reading the scriptures in the church. 1 hour, that's all I'm at. Not for me, for Jesus. And he said, if you can't come, your son can come, your mother, your grandmother, but don't leave Jesus alone, because that's your family's responsibility. The church, they never had any problem. And many people told me they got lots of vocations, marriages were healed, and round the clock. But every family in the parish had a slot where they were responsible to keep Jesus company. Isn't it a good idea? And it changed the parish. But I'd say to you, as you know, adoration is the radiant treatment for the soul. Adoration is where you can sit with Jesus and have a chat with him, talk to him, adore him, and listen to him. And people say to me, oh, Sister Briege, at your age, how do you get so much energy? I get my energy, not from what New Agers talk about, you know, getting energy from inside and all that stuff. I get energy from Jesus. I love to sit in the Blessed Sacrament, just sit there. Now and then, when I'm tired, I might fall asleep. But even St. Therese said, he ministers to us when we're asleep. You know, he doesn't mind if you have a little snooze and you're tired. He's not asleep. He's doing his work on us. So please, and I beg you, remember the three things about the Eucharist. It's the sacrifice of the passion, death, and resurrection. It's communion. It's a transfusion of Jesus himself. And it's his living presence. So let's finish off again with this beautiful prayer. Thank you for your sacrificial love, for standing in for me at Calvary, taking my place, erasing my sin, redeeming my soul, for paying the ransom I could never provide, cancelling the debt I could never repay, and reclaiming my soul for eternity. At the price of your death on the cross, thank you, Jesus, with all my heart for your saving love. Amen. God bless you all. I'll be over in the hall, a cup of tea or whatever they give me, and I'll sign any books. This is the last time if you only come in the morning, and I have some medals, a miraculous medal, so I'll be over there in a few minutes. God bless you. And for all of you on the media, I'm praying for you, and I will be praying especially for you all tonight. God bless you all, and thank you for watching.